to invite Pastor Peter and Pastor Rudy up on stage. They're going to talk to us about leadership. Welcome. Hi. All right. Wait, I want to face you guys more. I want to feel like I'm talking to you guys. Hi.
Hey.
Hi,
Shara.
Hi.
Hi, Shara.
So, I love to talk, so that's why we're here talking. For me, I've been a product of leadership also. Like a lot of my growth came from very good leadership, and I'm so blessed to be in the company of you guys as well. And there's lots of questions in my time when I first came on board serving in church about leadership. And I think in this context, in this place, I feel like this is a great opportunity for a lot of us to learn a little bit more about the process, like how you guys think, what got you guys started in leadership and all that stuff. So before we start that part, why don't you guys introduce, can we start with Pastor Rudy? Can you introduce like the role, like what do you do in terms of leadership at the church?
Sure. I'm happy, excited as well to be here and sharing with everyone. I've been in Bread of Life International for about 4 years, and like my roles in a way has changed through the years. But at the moment, you guys pray for me for a campus pastor, so that will be part of my responsibilities and what I will be doing. But part of what I do in church it has to do with church life and small groups, especially with the Latinos and the Spanish small group.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Thank you.
Got your Latino fans together here.
They're all sitting in the front row.
That's part of what I do regarding church life and small groups. And also, work with other English small groups as well. So it's part of what I'm doing. And also, there is an awesome ministry team that sets up the chairs every Sunday and the venue, which is events team. And at the moment, I'm overseeing as well that team, and they're awesome as well. Every Sunday they come and we set up the place, the venue.
Wow.
Yeah. It's part of what I'm doing right now at church.
Yeah. And Pastor Peter, also, when you first started the church, right, and when you're starting EM, when it was first called EM, what were some of the things that you were doing in that season?
So we started in 2010, and when at that time it was really just my wife and I and a few other people. Pastor John was there as well, and so I was in charge of just everything. So everything that had to be done, I did it. So I would design the bulletin. I would print the bulletin. I would fold the bulletin. I would give out the bulletin as people come into service, and I would go and preach the sermon, and I would go and order the pizza.
We actually have a few copies of those bulletins in the
We actually still do, and we sometimes would look at it just to laugh at how badly made they were.
Honestly, I'm actually pretty impressed, because Peter did a pretty good job back then too, like with the resource that you have.
Right, which is Microsoft Word and Paint. That's the extent of my graphic design. I can use Microsoft Paint. I would copy and paste stuff. So just really everything. I think as a leader, you see what needs to be done, and you just get it done until you can raise up enough people to take over the things that you would like them to take over, so you can really focus on the things that you need to focus on.
I remember I saw you running when I went to church for my first time. He was doing everything.
So when Pastor Rudy came, we were like 30 people, right? 30, 40 people. But very early on, Pastor Rudy, he wasn't a pastor back then. He was still a student. He showed that leadership quality. He was a leader before anybody asked him to be a leader. We often talk about him pastoring the Latinos, but he was doing that before any one of us asked him to do it. It wasn't like we went and said, hey, can you pastor this group of Latino? We just naturally saw him doing it. There were Latinos that were coming in. He naturally took on that leadership role just to pastor them, take care of them in whatever way they need.
Yeah.
And so it was very evident just early on that leadership quality was in him.
So Pastor Rudy, what was going through your mind when you were asked to do that? Was that something you were ready to do at that point? How did you get to that point where you're like, I'll lead them? Was it something you were ready for?
Well, think it was really an interesting process, like how it happened. And actually, I didn't, in the beginning, I thought I wasn't in a position to lead people. Or I didn't feel like, I don't think, in my head was, I don't think I can lead people. And I think what happened was, it started out of a response to a need. I saw there was a need, and I mean, I saw like, oh, these guys really need help, right? Like, but not in a bad way. Like, they were coming to church, and I just had the heart for the Latinos, and I think it was, I saw there was a need, and in different areas, but there wasn't somebody that was actually helping them out, leading them out. But I didn't fully understand what a leader was, because I didn't feel capable, or I thought I can't lead people, right? Or I don't see myself as a leader. But I think responding to that need actually started the process of leading them and becoming a leader.
But leadership is quite a big word, right? A lot of times we say leadership. We have leadership camps, we have leadership conferences, we have all these different. What is leadership? How do you define leadership? Pastor Pierre, maybe can share with us how do you define the word leadership?
I love what John Maxwell. For those of you who might not know who John Maxwell is, he was a pastor, but he obviously led a really successful church. But has also done many things in leadership. And he said this one time, which I thought was really good. He said, leadership is about influence. And when you put it in that perspective, I think every single one of us has that leadership call in our lives. Because if you look at Genesis, when God placed all of us on earth, it was for human being, for you and I, to actually have influence over the planet, over the environment that we live in. And hopefully a good impact, a good influence. And so we were all created for that. And so I think at its core, leadership really is about that influence. And I think we all influence in many different ways. I think there are many different ways to lead, but we influence in many different ways. But whether we realize that is another thing. And it's only when we really realize that we are called to lead, like we're called to have influence, that we can work on our leadership. Then we ask ourselves the question, how am I influencing people? Because we're all influencing people, like every single one of you, you're influencing people in ways that you don't even know. Like when people go into a meeting, the atmosphere change. Either change for the better or for the worse, right? And whatever that is, that's leadership, that's influence. We're either leading badly, we're leading the group into a bad, we're leading them into a great energy and where we want to go. So I think we obviously, I think that in that aspect, it's just influence, and we're all doing it. It's whether we realize it and are consciously working on it and being built up in it or not.
Well, I mean, Pastor Rudy also mentioned it a little bit, like he was, there was a need.
Right.
And so I'm just thinking in my head too, like there are many times where we're in a place where there is a need that needs to be filled. Now, how do you differentiate a need to a burden? Like, how sometimes we have a burden towards something and then we'll do it. But then there's also times where there's a need, like how do we respond? Like, what are the ways a leader should respond to like a need versus a burden?
Well, I think for me, at least how I see it, or like how I was sharing the example of how I respond to that need, it was also, I saw the need, but I also felt that burden for the people and for the Latinos. So, there's different needs in church, right? And there's as well, everywhere there's needs. But I also identify that was a place where I can help. I noticed that I felt that burden in my heart, and also there was a need, so I respond to that. And there was also other needs in church, but I didn't respond to them right away, or that wasn't I didn't feel God was calling me to respond there, but I felt this is a place where I actually can respond to it, and I had the heart that, and I saw there was a need there. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it works perfectly together because when Pastor Rudy or any one of us see a need, we respond to it. What are we doing? We're having influence. We're stepping in, having influence in an area that needed influence, needed positive influence. And so I think a lot of times, if we just, because I think we need to demystify this leadership, right? It's sometimes we think it's this, you got to get an MBA, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. And
It's like so far away.
it's far away,
Yeah.
and we look at great leaders and we admire. But sometimes great leaders, I love what Pastor Rudy shared his story. I think sometimes great leaders are just the one who responded to a need, and I think that's true if you're looking biblically. Sometimes I think about like as our team grow, our interview process gets more and more
Complicated.
complex,
Yeah.
and the demands are higher.
Right.
We actually have something called a 1 hour window where we put people who interview for a job through 1 hour. We give them a bunch of tasks to make them do it, to stress them out, to just test them what they're like under stress. And then sometimes I look back and think, man, would either any of us have passed that if we have done it? And they probably not. When I started, if someone put me on it, I would have. But there was just we saw a need, we responded to it, and ta-da, and we're here today. And so I think a lot of time it's just to demystify that. It's not about this great, you don't really sometimes have to have everything figured out, but are you responding to what you see? Are you seeing your area of responsibility in the area of deficiency? And when we do see that, then that's where leadership is created.
That's cool. I mean, we have a question here that someone has asked about what are the important characteristics that keep leadership sustainable? Like, because leadership.
That's good.
A
Whoever
lot of
asked that, that's good.
a lot of times, you have leaders rising up, and then they sometimes face a burnout. Like, how do you pass the baton, or how are you creating something that someone else can also rise up to? Can you share some of your thoughts on that?
You want to go? You want me? Okay, I'll go first. You sure? Yeah. When you let Peter speak, you might not even get a chance. So that's how I want
You might stand up and do a preaching sermon already.
I think I just quote what Chai shared, because this morning we were doing this with Chai, and she said something really good. And it's about your own heart. It's about leading yourself well. And I think what makes leadership sustainable is just are you keeping yourself healthy? And then most of the time when if I'm thinking about leadership, putting somebody in leadership, my primary concern isn't to make sure that person has a lot of these and other great qualities, but I want to make sure this person is in a healthy place. Because I think if we're in a healthy place, then we will figure out a lot of things later on. Most of these things cannot be figured out beforehand. It's always actually going through these things and you're dealing with these things that you learn and grow in leadership. Leadership, the thing about talking about leadership is this: everything sounds great and amazing until you do it.
Yeah.
Right? And what's going to help you to sustain that is whether you're healthy inside.
Yeah.
And what Chai was sharing this morning is that whatever is inside of you, when you're in leadership, it does come out. And because we always create a world around us according to the world that's within. And so what makes leadership really sustainable is placing yourself in a place where you're healthy. And that might look a little bit different with everybody. But I think some of the key ingredient to those things, regardless of who you are, is meaningful relationships. You want to have meaningful relationships in your life, engagement. You need to have a strong sense of why you do what you do. And you need to be in, and for those of us who are Christ followers, I think it's the secret weapon. It's your relationship with God. Chai was saying that over again this morning as we were at FX and this morning at FX. It's your relationship with God. It's what is God saying to you about where you are, because that's the word. What God says to you, that's going to sustain you.
That's Rudy. You have thoughts?
I totally agree. I was thinking also, especially like through these past months, I think, and something that God has been speaking to me was about the thankful heart. And it has to do with what Pastor Peter was sharing, like keeping ourselves healthy, our heart healthy. And I think one of how might show or how we might see it, one of these characteristics could be through a thankful heart. And I think the reflection of a thankful heart can be seen through through humility and also through hunger. I think that's something that will help us as well in our leadership or as leaders. If we keep ourselves healthy, and I think that some ways or some characteristics of how we might see it, how we can see it. I think like having a thankful heart, and that I think can be seen through our humility and our hunger.
How do you stay thankful then, like for you personally? Sorry, I'm kind of taking over that.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like what does that look like?
I think it's constantly, at least for me, is constantly, you're talking about the why, right? And knowing the why, it has to do with having a thankful heart, right? I'm thankful for what God has done through my past year or past few years. And I personally, it has to do with, coming back to Him, because there's times where I don't feel like, there's a lot of struggles and there is a lot of things I'm going through, and it's not easy to be focusing on being thankful, right? And I think is coming back to Him and reminding myself of what He has done. And not only focus on what He hasn't done, but focus on what He has done in the past. It will help me or prepare me to receive what is coming ahead, I think.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
You should preach a sermon called "Come Back." Let's make that it.
That's good. Okay, we're talking also about like how, for some people, leadership looks like a far away thing, like a distant thing. I don't know if I'm made for leadership. So there's this question, like, how are you born to be a leader? Like, are we all born to be a leader, or do you actually make someone a leader? Like, some people may feel like, I'm not born to do this. Leadership is just not me. Like, what would you say to someone who says that?
Well, I think that's probably what every leader has felt at one point. And like what we were saying, I think every single one of us were born to be leaders because God created us in His image, and God is a leader. And if we just simply demystify leadership and say it's influence, then I think we all know we have influence. And you have influence. Just ask the people around you, and they will tell you either you're a good influence in their life or you're a bad influence in their life. But in whatever way we have influence, even a bad father is showing some type of leadership, right? And so the key is recognizing we all have influence. We're more powerful and significant than we can ever dream of, that we're here for a purpose, and to really focus on what that purpose is and ask God to shape us, mold us more into a Christ likeness, more like Him, so we can reflect that kind of leadership. So yes, I think we're born to be leaders, but we're not. But leadership doesn't come naturally, in the sense that it does require a lot of thoughts. It does require discipline. It does require paying the cost, paying the price. But that call, I think, is personally, I do believe it's for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think the same. I mean, totally agree. And the thing, like, is like us here, we're not different from you guys out there. We're the same person, but we're just responding, like what we were sharing before, just responding to a need, to a burden. And so we are all called to be, to be leaders. But it's up to us if we respond to that. And what Pastor Peter was sharing, I think it has to do with. We are born with that call to be leaders, but it must be developed, right? Our leadership must be developed, because everything, when we think about leadership, it's, there's a need for the leadership, and you were sharing the beginning that in Genesis, from the beginning, God gave us the authority to take dominion, right? He's giving us the leadership. He's empowering us to actually lead. And I think about when you were saying about a father, how a father, he might have his kids, and we all seen what happens when a father is, making some noise or, telling some jokes or saying a word. even if he wants or not, eventually the kid will repeat what the father is saying. So he's having influence even if he is not aware of it, or he is. So it's like what you were sharing. It's we all have that influence, but we need to be aware of that and respond to that.
Yeah, leadership is like a skill. You have to. It's like riding a bicycle, right? You don't jump on the bicycle immediately and ride it. You have to learn to fall at times, and crash into a tree once in a while, and figure your way around the bicycle. But also, I think personally for myself too, being in positions where I had to lead some people. There are many times where I failed, and I must say sometimes I feel pretty bad. I was like, oh my gosh, am I leading these people right? Or am I doing the right thing? And it's caused me to doubt my own leadership at times too. Sometimes I feel like God has put me in a place where I can lead people, but how am I leading them? Am I adequately leading them? And what if I don't lead them to the right place? There's always that fear. So how would you manage or advise people to manage that fear?
Wow.
That's a good question.
Because it's scary sometimes, if someone sees a leader leading a bunch of people and it's like, oh, it looks so hard. It looks like you need to know so much, you need to study so much, you need to always be online 24/7 answering problems, trying to solve people's problems or getting people to come. Like it's scary for someone below to see that and just want to be a leader. So as a leader first, how do you manage that inadequacy?
Well, I think, like I was saying, none of us are perfect. Like, we're the same as you guys out there. We're just responding. But I think Pastor Peter shared before, there's a saying, a quote from Craig Rochelle that he says that people are not looking for the leader that is right, but a leader that is
Authentic.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, people are not looking for a leader who's always right, but they're looking
yeah.
for a leader who is authentic and has integrity, basically.
Yeah, and I think that has to do a lot with that, to help us in that inadequacy. Is that how you say it?
Inadequacy?
Inadequacy. Because it's not that we have everything figured out, but I think to be okay with that, like ourselves, it's really it's a challenge, but we have to, at least for me, I'm learning to accept myself as I am.
Wow.
And the gift that God has put in my life, and just do what I can with what I have and honor what God has put in my life, because it's at the end is God who has put me in this position, and also the God who has gave me what I have. So I think like accepting myself as I am and knowing or making sure that I'm growing, I think that helps me, because I'm accepting myself, of course, that I'm not perfect and I do mistakes as well, but I'm also growing, and I think it's recognizing the gift that God has put in my life as well, to honor that as well. Not only honor, I honor the gift on Pastor Peter, and I think that's easier for me than recognize it, or honor my own, because I feel like, oh, I don't think I can do that. But the way I'm going about it is also honoring what God has put in my life. It's not because of me, but it's because of Him, and He has given me something.
And that's why I love, God puts us in community for that exact reason. There's some things that we don't see. We need someone else to point it out to us, and it's like, hey, you're actually not doing that bad of a job. You're actually doing pretty good.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes we're our own harshest critics.
Yeah.
And I think as a leader, if you can just simply tell people, point out, like a leader is trying to catch people doing the right thing, not the wrong things. And so we're always trying to catch people doing the right thing and make sure that they know, man, you did a great job in that.
Yeah.
Right? Not that we don't review and point out things that we need to do better in, but I think we can just do that. That sets us up in a great place of having positive influence in other people's life. And like what Pastor Rudy was saying about, facing your own deficiency, and what you were saying about, we all have moments, right?
Yeah.
I have those moments a lot. And there's a reason why on Tuesday nights, I always exercise. Because our Tuesday is our meeting days, right? We have this thing called Power 40. Power 40 is when we get 40 minutes to talk about something together. And I tell you, like when I go home, because I have meetings from morning till boom, the end.
Yep.
And that's just the meeting day. And sometimes I go home and I will have a list of, oh man, I shouldn't have said that, or didn't put that the right way, or I shouldn't have gotten so frustrated at this, or maybe I should have done this better. And I really do a lot of time go home with these thoughts. But when I do go home and just exercise, clear my mind a little bit, and just rethink, re-engage, think about how I can go back and re-engage some of these things, it really does help. So I think sometimes just to move forward as a leader, it's just, if you would just have a higher tolerance of personal failure, you're on your way to becoming a leader. Like just, if you can fail repeatedly without losing passion, fail repeatedly without losing steam, and feeling burnt out, then you're on your way. Because we're trying to be leaders in the long run. We're trying to become better and better leaders. We're not trying to become someone who leads extraordinarily for a few years of our life, but our years are long.
Yeah.
Like we have many years ahead of us.
Yeah.
And you, right? So
yeah, it's just having
stop
grace over yourself as a leader
Grace
as well.
for yourself,
Yeah,
yes.
that's
That's
so
the right
important.
word.
I know it's hard, it's hard sometimes, but I think like really, like God really gives you the courage as you keep faithful, in doing just one step at a time. And if you're making sure that you're growing and just be faithful with the little, I think like as leaders, we're responsible to do what is in our power, right? How we respond and what we do. But like God is the one that actually does the impossible, right?
Yeah.
And the supernatural. But we just need to make sure that we're responding to that call. And God is the one that actually works the supernatural, the impossible, especially on people's lives, right? We can't change people, right? We're just God's instruments. And if we're responding to that, God will do the impossible, I think.
No, I'm gonna go a little bit more into the vulnerable area, just go in there. Because like as you guys are sharing, reflecting, a lot of times I do my reflecting in the shower. I don't know why. Like when I'm there and then the water's on, it's like, oh my gosh, the whole day is just playing back in my head. And then sometimes when I'm meeting with people, then I will share some of these things with them. However, there are moments as leaders you want to be vulnerable with the people that you're leading, but also kind of it was mentioned in the first or the second Let's Talk today, and I thought it was a really good question. Like, how do you balance as a leader between being authentic with somebody and being like a friend? Because you're leading someone, how you be vulnerable versus authenticity. Like, how would you?
Wow, that's a lot of questions packed
Sorry.
into one. But I catch what you're trying. What we're saying is, how do we have that relationship with the people we lead,
Right.
where we are being real and honest,
Yeah.
and yet we're not just being the peer, we're still leading them.
Right, because like if you see someone and like, suddenly you're friends with them, like you're on a different level. Like the way you listen to each other, the way you take advice start to change.
Right. Like, I think if you look at how Jesus and his followers are, I think Jesus was extremely close with his disciples, and yet the disciple never lost, hopefully, right? Never lost on honor and respect towards him. And Jesus showed them his vulnerable side. When he was right before going to the cross, going to the Garden of Castellanos to pray, he brought his closest disciple, not all of them, but the one who catch his heart the most, brought them over, and he was frustrated at them for even falling asleep. And so I think Jesus was close with his disciples, and so I think the key isn't about the distance, because distance can be manipulated. You can do certain things to manipulate and create distance to make us seems more, as a leader, seems more, amazing or whatever. And because how people say distance, I don't know if people say this, but I say this. Sometimes things are more beautiful in the distance.
Oh yeah.
Right?
The grass is greener on the other side.
Right, grass is green. It's just, when you're far away looking at something, things look good. Get close, not so much. And so as a leader, there's that temptation to create that distance. But I think the distance is not, it's not about creating a distance, but it's about creating honor. It's about creating a culture of honor where we can be close and we can, have fun, but we don't lose the honor for one another. And that goes for both. Goes for the people you're leading and the people that's following a leader. And so I think the honor is the key thing. How do we do it and still keep honor? And that's a tricky thing to figure out, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But it's it's our commitment to figuring out a commitment to that as in our relationship that's going to keep our relationship healthy and empowering for one another.
And I remember, or I can tell so many stories about our office and our staff, right? Like, we're friends, but at the same time, there's moments of tension and disagreements, but still we're able to, maybe we said something that offends somebody else, but we still are willing and able to come before each other and just tell them, hey, this is how I feel when you said this and this, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't change our relationship or a love for each other.
That's so
And
good.
I think that, that's very important, what Pastor Peter was sharing about.
Yeah, and that's what I really loved. I mean, being part of our team is like how much we really love one another. Like, it was first the love that brought us together. I mean, like, of course, it was developed over time, right? But because we chose to love one another, we were able to do a lot of the things we do. And yeah, I think that's really great. But in the context of church, like what we're doing, someone was asking, like, what is the biggest challenge that you have had since you became a leader? What are some of the challenges that you've faced?
Wow.
Maybe just list.
You want to
one.
go first? Why don't you go first?
It's like, which
There's
one?
many challenges. Yeah.
Do we have enough time for this?
Yeah. I think first one of my biggest challenges especially when I started to lead. I think it was just to accept myself, to recognize that there was something I could give to people.
Oh,
There
wow.
was accept that in my life. I remember when we had a conversation, and back then Pastor Jacqueline and also Pastor Peter, we're talking about joining staff and being part of the staff. I remember when they talked to me and we were having the conversation about becoming one of their staff, I couldn't sleep for a week. Kind of like, just, like, how, me and, become a leader and do this and this. And I think accepting myself and recognizing that I actually have something to give.
That's good.
I think that's it's a big challenge, and also something that God worked in my life. And when we actually respond, it's incredible what God does, because I can, or at least I wasn't able to imagine that back then. And that was really a big challenge for me. But I think it's God through us, and I think He's the one that helps us overcome that, because it's, at the end, I think how He helped me process that and go through that is recognizing that, yes, I'm a vessel, and yes, I might not have, everything together, but I have something to give, and that's because He lives inside of me, and it's because of Him as well. And that helped me to navigate in that, I think, that season, or that, I think, challenge that I have in my life. That was a big one, I think. Yeah.
Cool.
I would share very similar to what Pastor Rudy was saying. I think the challenges are many, and they vary in different settings and, whatever it is you're trying to do. But the greatest challenge really comes to how you handle it internally. So Pastor Rudy was talking about the way he saw himself. And I think, we often share this. The hardest person to lead is yourself. That's the hardest person to lead. The hardest person on your team as a leader is you, right? You're the hardest person to lead. And at the end of the day, you are also the only person you actually truly have control over.
Yes.
Because we don't have control over other people. We don't have control over what other people would do, say, or think, or even how they would respond. You can say something with the greatest intention and have it received totally differently. And so I think at the end of the day, I think one of my greatest challenges also, it's always about how I respond to a certain situation, how I view certain things in my heart. And because it's very easy sometimes to make your heart disappointed.
Yeah.
It's very easy to feel bitter. It's very to feel deflated, and to feel like, like, what's the point? And those moments, I think it's what you do with those moments. And again, to share what Chai was saying, it's that moment, your relationship with God, knowing why God has called you and what you're supposed to be doing and the purpose that he has given you. Those are the things that help me manage my heart. But that's really the hardest thing. I really do think that's the hardest thing. It's because you cannot lie to yourself. You know, you can only, even if you do, you can only lie to yourself for so long. And until you realize you're just lying to yourself, and you got to face certain things that you really do have to face.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times when these things happen I mean, I guess as you're leading, you still have to manage your own personal life on the side. There's stuff that happens, you know, life still goes on. You know, your relationships that we gotta still invest into and manage. So that's a question someone's asking. Like, how do you manage your personal life while serving in church, while doing what you're doing as a leader?
You want to look at me? Okay. All right. Personal life, first of all, I think everything's related, right? There's no such thing as personal life and work life, or ministry life and personal life. I think it's all related. It's you are that one person. You are that one person in different settings. And so you always will bring your personal life to work, and you will always bring work to your personal life. It's interconnected, because it's not like when you check out, you don't become a totally different person. And so I think a lot of these things is about, for me personally, it's about what gives me energy, right? So for me, work gives me energy. But so does my family. So does spending time with Peggy. So does spending time with Ellie. So does spending time with my friends. Friday nights is when I just hang out with people. I love doing that. And those things give me energy. Monday morning is when I watch a movie by myself. And that gives me energy. And so I think what helps me manage these things is to make sure that all these different components in my life are there to give me energy. And if I feel like something is taking more energy away from giving energy, then it's time to readjust and to rethink some of these things, or how I'm approaching these things, how I'm looking at these things. But I do believe God gave us everything to create energy inside of us, to give us motivation. I actually do believe work is not supposed to be draining of energy. The net output of work is actually positive energy. I believe work was created by God for mankind to give us a life of purpose. And I don't know if you realize this, but when you go to heaven, it's not just sitting on the clouds. God has given us the world to reign with. To reign with him in. And so there are things that I think will be working for the rest of our lives into eternity. And so these things are supposed to give us purpose, and a purpose connection is a big part of it. Am I being connected, right? So if you're in a meeting, are you just looking at the cell phone? Because that to me is disconnection. If I'm at home, am I just being disconnected? Because my wife had to point it out to me a few years ago remember BlackBerry? Remember BBM? Because BlackBerry is evil, because it tells you on the red blinking light that a message has come in, whereas you wouldn't have known if you were using another phone, right? It's just, you see that blinking light. I have this obsessive need to clear out all my messages.
Oh, yes.
Even just to read it without responding. I just want to clear it out, right? It's my OCD, right? And so my wife had to point out, Peggy had to point out that I was being disengaged. You know, I was being disengaged in our dinner times. And so those are things that I had to readjust to make sure that when I'm with my wife, when I'm with her, I don't feel like it's draining me of energy, but it's actually giving me energy. And the only way it can give me energy is if I'm fully engaged with the present, with what I'm doing right now.
That's good. Totally agree.
I think one thing I've learned through, probably these past 4 years is, and something Pastor Peter teaches us and also Pastor John is, like, what we do is really, it has to be out of, ministries, out of the abundance of what God is doing in our lives.
That's good.
It's not just doing something here and doing something there. It's actually being who God called us to be, and that it's in the, in the context of my relationship with God. What is He doing in my life? And from here, it will overflow to the rest of the things. And having God as the first place in my life doesn't mean that my family, my relationships will be second. It is not like saying, oh, I'm going to go to church and I'll be in church all day and I don't have to take care of my family, right? Or I don't have to take care of all the things, but rather having God as the first place in my life, it's also means that I'm taking care of my relationships. I'm also taking care of what Pastor Peter was saying, and I think that talks a lot about, you know, what God is doing in our life and also about our leadership. And when I see Pastor Peter taking care of his family and spending time with Ellie and also Peggy, that is teaching me a lot about leadership and also teaching me a lot about, you know, having God as the first place as well, because he's taking care of his family. And I think that's very important. For me as well, I think it has been a journey of learning as well that all these things is not either one or the other. It's if I have God first, things should be in place, and sometimes I need to readjust as well. And if I have to spend more time with Jessica, I spend more time with Jessica, and same talking with my family, I talk with my family as well. Like having that, I think it's very important.
Wow. So how do you learn all these things, you know? Because leadership, I mean, not everyone has the access like you guys, where you get the privilege to be in a community or a space where you have great leaders to lead you. So what are some of the resource or areas where people can get a hold of some of these materials to learn about leadership?
And you know, I think like all of us, we didn't, when
We
we started,
know.
yeah.
We
have
went
to-
online and we search, we visit churches. I really believe in exposure. Like you have to be exposed to something that's bigger than yourself. And so we share a lot of time for us, we just share resources. Like recently this week I just shared a book I'm audio reading, and just to make it sound more like I'm listening, because I hate reading, but I love books. So I just share something with him, and sometimes people share stuff with me, and so I think it's just finding that it's out there. I don't think it's not there. I think it's just if you are willing, you will do it. You will find it. When we're starting stage 1, our internship program, I didn't know how to do it. You didn't know how to do it. None of us knew how to do it. So guess what we did? I wrote an email to this church in the States called Elevation, which I think they have a great internship program. I wrote to them and said, how do you guys do internship program? Can you teach me? And they wrote back. They actually wrote back and gave me, ask me any questions. And we just had this engagement. We talked. And they told me how the first year of them doing it absolutely was so bad that they did a survey with all the interns. None of them said they would ever do this again. And what they learn from that experience. And so I think if you're willing, there's always going to be a way to do it. I think the word is out there. Resources are out there.
Yeah. And I think like also a huge part of being a leader is that leaders, we're learners. So we need to constantly be learning. And I think that's why we look for resources. We look for people or being exposure, because there's a lot of things that we don't know, and we encounter these things, and we need to learn what can we do, how can we change some things,
and to dig it out, dig it off the leader that God has always placed in your life. Many years ago, about 5 years ago, I had this is probably 2 years into me coming to Taiwan. I had a lunch. I was having lunch with Pastor John, and at the end of lunch, he shared with me. He says, "Hey, I feel like today was the first time in the years that we know each other, 2-3 years, I feel like you're really trying to dig out of me something." And I took that and said, that's what I want to do. I want to do that with Pastor John in my life. I want to do that with the leaders in my life. I want to go and, and there's a lady, we call her 处长 at our mother church. She was a successful, in her marketplace before coming to work in church. And I really admire her. And so I would just go to her office and just talk and chat and just dig things out of her. We're not talking about anything specific, but those moments when you try to dig out the things in the leaders that God has placed in your life, I think those are precious.
How do you dig? Because I have those moments too where next time with the shovel. Yeah, I have those moments too when I'm face to face with someone who's a leader and I know this person. It's like, man, I watch you on YouTube, and now you're alive in front of me, and I'll be like so in awe. I'm standing in front of this person that I forget how to speak. So like at those moments, it's an opportunity.
Right.
And so like how do you ask questions at those opportunities? Like what sort of questions would you ask?
I think Pastor Rudy would be able to answer this well because he really is a learner. He really digs things out. And I've seen him, like when we go to conferences, he would have coffee with just some of the pastors who are there and just try to dig things out. So how do you do it?
I think I've learned a lot from you, Pastor John. But I think like, God has given us, or what you were saying, God has put people in our lives next to us. And the answers that we're looking for, it's already, like we already have them, but we need to dig them, right? Like we need to ask. And something that I think I've learned through these past years as well, and a lot is from Pastor Peter and Pastor John, is it's not that we ask, how to do things, but actually to ask people or ask questions that help us understand why people think the way they think. I think that's very important, and catch their heart, because we won't do exactly the same things that they're doing, but we want to understand why is it that people think the way they think. So we try to catch their heart, and why is it that they're doing that, and we're not going back and copy those things, but we're understanding the heart of why is it that they're doing that. I think it's very important.
That's so true. I totally agree with that. It's about learning the why. There's one of this, we often look at, like, sometimes we would look at people who are really rich, right, who have started successful companies, and I would hear people say, if I was that rich, I wouldn't be working anymore. And they ask them, why are they still working? Like, why is Mark Zuckerberg still working? Why is this person still working? And sometimes I want to just say to the person who said that, it's because you think like that, that's why you will never be that rich. And the reason why these people do what they do it's not about the what, it's about the why. They have a strong why in their lives. And obviously, I think sometimes it could be about, there's other extreme cases where it's just about greed, about competition, all that. I do want to recognize that could be there. But I think most of the time it's because these people have has a need inside of them, has a desire inside of them to make a difference. They have a desire inside of them to create something that's of value. And this is why people would start a great company, and they would sell it for a couple $1 million, and they would be set for the rest of that, and they would go and start something else. It's just because there's this need inside of them to impact, to influence. And so I think spending time with these people, it's just trying to, not about what are you doing, what are you doing next? What are you doing next? It's about why do you do this? Why are you so engaged? Why are you still so passionate? Why are you still putting yourself in situations where you could be sitting on the beach and just drinking, I was going to say margarita, but this is church, milk and bubble tea, right? Why aren't you doing that? And I think just having that conversation with them, you begin to realize there's something unique about the way they think about things, about life, about why they're here, and that we can learn a lot from.
That's good. Hey, I know that when you're in leadership, there are many times where you have things that you celebrate, and then there are times where when you fail, you're like, there are the joys, the ups and the downs, right? So, what are some of your personal experiences in when you're celebrating a victory, and how do you manage some of the failures in leadership? Maybe you can share a little bit about a scenario,
like
a situation, an actual example for one. Do you have any? I'm sure you do. Yeah. I do have a lot.
Oh, I have. Yeah, who want to go first?
Okay.
You want to go first, or
maybe?
Okay, I'll go. I'll let you think. The difference between Pastor Rudy and I is I'm a verbal processor. I have to speak to know what I'm actually thinking. He thinks before he speaks. And so sometimes I don't even know what I believe until I say it. So I'll let Pastor Rudy have some time to think about it. But for me, I'll give you just a recent example that just came to my mind. Recently, we were in a staff meeting. I was meeting with 4 different staff, 4 or 5. And in the meeting, I was frustrated about something that one of the not within the group, okay, another staff who did something at a standard that I don't believe was what I wanted to be done at. I believe it was not up to the standard of what I believe we should be doing church at. And so I was speaking to these people, and I was saying, that person did this, and it wasn't good. So I was trying to use that as a teaching moment to tell them not to do that. And then later on that night when I went home, I was exercise. It was a Tuesday, right? So I thought about my reflection time on Tuesday when I'm exercising. And the Holy Spirit just reminded me, just rebuked me for doing that. And said, when you said that, when you did that, that was a poor example of what leadership is, because you're talking about somebody else who's not in the room, and whatever you say is not going to benefit that person, right? That person has no idea that you're talking about this, and so you didn't need to use that person as an example to teach these people something. What you needed to do is talk to that person personally about reviewing about something that happened. And so what I had to do is on that following Friday, I had to call the team back, where I was having that conversation with them. I said, can I talk to you guys for a second? And I said, I just need to apologize for what I said. Because that wasn't right, and that was dishonoring to you and to that person. And I called that person in, and that person has no idea why that person's being called in. And I called the person and said, I want to apologize. The person had no idea what happened, and just said, I said this behind your back, and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. That was poor example of leadership. And so we have these moments always, and it's always, I think it's just about listening to what the Holy Spirit is telling you, and just being at a place where you can make adjustments, and not being too proudful that no, And so that's the part I'm talking about when it's about managing your own heart, managing where you're at, because I think if we can do that well, then so that's an example of just a poor example of leadership that I think I just exhibit at that moment out of a frustration I was feeling.
How about some of the joys? Like some of the joys of being in leadership, or something that's happened?
I think like when you see, as leaders, we have to sacrifice, right? And we have to do things that are not easy sometimes. And I think to actually see the result of that, or seeing someone, for example, that becomes a believer, that gets baptized, somebody that is healed. I think somebody on our small group was sharing part of what God is doing in their lives. Like, we've been praying for a job, right? And after a couple of weeks, they got that promotion. I think celebrating those things it's what help us to come alive and celebrate what God is doing, because we're doing this first out of love for God, and also to love because we love the people. And I think spend the time to celebrate with them. And when people share what God is doing in their lives and see that transformation, it really, it's a joy, I think, in our lives.
And this is a good reminder. We do have testimony cards. When every Sunday we do the prayer, we actually also have an exact card that says testimony. And I think that's kind of what we like to go through too. As we're praying for people, we also like to see what God has done. And, just a reminder, we do have testimony cards.
You guys need to help us remember why we do this.
The why.
Because we don't really get paid a lot doing this. But we start our Tuesday staff meeting always with testimonies.
Yeah.
Have you heard any testimony from church? Have you heard any testimony? And we share them and we celebrate together. Yeah. And so we would love to hear from you guys of what God is doing in your lives. And because that really does help us remind us that why we do what we do.
I'll take one more question then. This person's asking, is leadership lonely? And how do you deal with that?
Are you guys ready to be here for another hour?
That's a good question.
Because imagine when you first started too. I'd imagine there was like you said, there was a lot of things that you were doing.
Right.
And I guess casting the vision for people takes time.
Right.
So in that process, as you were journeying through, also figuring out leadership on your own.
Yes.
How has that been, and how did
I'll go first. Okay. I would say yes and no. Yes, meaning there are absolutely moments of leadership that's lonely. But I don't think that's what defines leadership. I don't think leadership is defined by the loneliness that you feel. If we define it that way, it's quite dangerous. But there are moments, I think, but that's true with all of our journey with God. I think we all know that in our journey with God, there are parts of our journey that people will walk with you. And God puts people there. But there are parts of your journey, or I'm not talking about just like a timeline, but I'm talking about a certain aspect of your journey that it's just you and God. And God could surround you with the greatest people, with the greatest wife, and people who loves you. But there is still that part that you just got to figure out between you and God. And I think that's true. That translates into leadership as well. Leadership, overall, I look at leadership. I don't think it's lonely. I have great people around me. I really get energy from being with you guys, with the not even just with the staff, but with the non-staff, and we hang out together. We play board games, right? We talk. We discover. You guys know how to play Risk? There's this game called Risk. They recently have a Game of Thrones edition. We're like addicted to that. There's a group of us. And so those moments are, of course they're not lonely. I enjoy it. I probably have more friends because I work in church than if I was never part of church. But there are those moments where because you do sometimes see things ahead that nobody else sees yet, or you do have to make certain decisions. And so there are those moments where you do feel a little bit lonely. But I try not to let those moments define what leadership is like, because I think that's just a glimpse of an aspect of leadership. It's not the totality of leadership. It's not even just a part of the journey. It's simply one aspect, and there are multiple aspects every moment that we are in. And so I can feel lonely and feel fulfilled and connected at the same time. I think it's quite. I think both can happen at the same time.
Totally agree. I think it's, like both things. What you say, I totally agree as well. There's moments of loneliness, but also moments of.
What do you do when you're lonely? Do you call Jessica?
Sometimes. But even I think like what you're sharing is there's moments where it's really, really just you and God, and those are special moments. And when I go back to those moments, I think those are really special moments as well. Like that in the moment is not nice. I think how we see it, or what we're facing or feeling like that. But when I think about those moments, I think it has been moments where I really have encountered God in a greater way, because it's just me and Him, and He's the only one that will understand, and help me to figure out those things. And that's, I think, a part of it. And also the other part where you're sharing, I think it's very fun to do ministry with covenant relationships and have all of people around you. It really, I think there's, without covenant relationships and not having people around you, it's very hard. But it's very fun, and also I think that's how we should do it in covenant relationships.
That's cool. Well, we're almost coming to the end of our Let's Talk. It's really great to have this conversation. I'm sure there's a lot more stuff that we want to share with everyone and discuss. But what are some of if you have any final thoughts about leadership, and just to encourage some people who are really thinking, hey, is leadership something for me? Do you have any final thoughts to share with everyone?
Sure. I think I really, enjoyed this talk, and during, I think it was one of our small groups some time ago, somebody was asking in our small group, why is it that there's so much pain and there's so much things going on in the world and so much tragedy? And I don't know how that conversation started in our small group, and we were just having a discussion. It was a really good discussion, and the person was asking about it, and I think, I was thinking about it, and about that time where this person was asking about this question, or make this question. And I think it's very important because, in the book of Romans, it says that the earth is waiting for the sons and daughters of God to manifest, right? And I think all of us are called to be leaders. And leadership, it's something God has called us to, and we need to respond. And when we think about leadership, nothing happens without a leader. Nothing will begin without a leader. Nothing will change without a leader. So it's important. We need leaders, right?
Yeah.
Because everything that we're living and experience, it's not God's fault. He already gave us dominion, but we need to respond to that calling. And I believe it's a privilege to actually lead people, and it is a privilege as well to respond to God and partner with God. And I think that's not only for some qualified people or just for some special people. It's for all of us.
Yeah.
And we just start with what we have, and we just respond with what we have, and God does the rest as long as we respond. Somebody said that our greatest ability is our availability, and as we respond, God will do something great in our lives.
That's a good word.
Yeah, but it's somebody said our greatest ability is our availability.
That's good.
As we respond to God, God will do great things in our lives. So I think that's something, as we were talking today, is that we're all called, but it's upon us if we respond or not. And I think the world needs leaders, and the world is crying out for the manifestation of the sons and daughters of God. And we all get to be part of this. So I really encourage you guys. And, we have things that we're doing in church. We just started our growth track. We're starting classes to equip you guys. And this is because out of our heart to help you guys to grow and also to prepare you guys as well and help you in this journey. And I will really encourage you. We're doing all these things, and it's to actually help you and to actually, I think, encourage you to join. I will encourage you to join and help you. It will help you in your growth and in your journey with God as well. And that's something we're starting. We already started. I will encourage you guys to be part of it. It will really help you. And I think, we just start with something, with what we have, and it's by responding. And that's why we're creating all of this, is because we love you guys and we see great potential in each of you guys. And
Amen.
Amen. And
Yeah.
maybe we can pray. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we all stand up?
Let's all
and
stand.
we
Thank
will-
you, Pastor
we'll pray.
Peter and Pastor Rudy.
Why don't we open our hands and just receive from God? I believe, like what we were talking today, that all of us have potential within us, and all of us are called, but it's a few that respond right. And I believe that all of us are called, and let's respond to Him. I believe each of you guys, all of us have something to give. And as we respond, God will do great things upon our lives. Maybe you don't feel qualified, or you might say, I just have something little. I don't, I'm not perfect. I might not have such qualities, or I don't have much to give. But you don't have to have much to give. It just starts with something. All the miracles that God did in the Bible, it just started with something little. But when we come and give it to Him, He will do great things with it. Amen. Father, we just thank You today. Thank You that Your presence is in this place, Father. And as we're talking today about leadership, Father, and the call to lead, Father, You're a leader. You're our greatest example, Father. We know that it's not easy, Father, but it is a privilege to lead, Father. And we also know, Father, that as we bring something to You, Father, You will do something amazing in our lives, Father. I just want to pray, Father, for each of my brothers and sisters, Father, as they're responding to Your call today, Father, and as they bring what they have, Father, I just pray, Father, that You do amazing things through their lives, in their lives, Jesus, as they're responding to the call of leadership, Father. We thank You, Father, that You already paid the price, the impossible price. You already paid it, Father. And we're just responding out of love, Father, to You, Jesus. We thank You, Father. I pray for each of our brothers and sisters, Father. And if there's anyone that feels inadequate today, Father, I just pray that Your presence filled their hearts, Father, and that You help them to see what they have is from You, Jesus. I bless them today, Father, and I thank You, Jesus. In Your name we'll pray and say amen. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Bless you
Let's
guys.
just give Pastor Rudy a hand real quick. Hey, turn to the person next to you and say, God has called you to be a leader. Man, you guys got some good wisdom, some real nuggets today. Go out to the world and apply it. If you can just give me your attention real quick, we're going to end our service right now. But before we do, like we do every single week, our prayer team is going to be up in the front to pray with you. If you have any prayer requests, anything that you're going through, you guys can come up and just receive some prayer, receive some encouragement. Also, we have our prayer team who has prayed for you guys throughout the week, and they received some prophetic words, some word of knowledge. So if any of these pertain to you, come up to the front. God has a special word for you. If you're new here, come visit our welcome center in the back. And also, if you haven't turned your offering yet, we also have our red box in the back. Other than that, have a great week. See you guys at church next week. Oh, also, if you guys have a black chair in the front, if you can kindly help us by bringing it over here. Our events crew is waiting, and they'll help you to clean up the chairs with us like we do every single week. Thank you.